We propose to get our budget not only on a path to balance, but onto paying off the debt on a path to prosperity.
Here we go again. Paul Ryan setting a hatchet to spending, and Democrats wasting little time today setting a hatchet to him. The Crying Over Ryan, Part 2. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and it wasn't an accident that House Budget Chief Paul Ryan chose today to announce spending cuts he knew a lot of folks would hate. He just figured that once Americans took a peek at the latest debt figures, also out today, they'd hate them more, and maybe him less. Because more or less, here's where we stand right now. In budget quicksand, sinking and sinking fast, really fast. I'm talking nearly $5 trillion fast. That is how much our debt has grown over the last 3 years of this president, more than the entire 8 years of the last president. And Ryan with a plan to stop the red that has a lot of Democrats just seeing red. Because to get to his $5.3 trillion in cuts over the next decade, Ryan goes after everything from Medicaid and food stamps to Pell Grants to the very structure of Medicare itself. And it is the details that is bringing out the Capitol Hill devils, like Ryan's plan to slash the federal workforce by at least 10% and cut $2 trillion in taxes that Democrats say favors the rich at the expense of the poor. Minnesota Republican Congresswoman Michele Bachmann says she's heard all of this before, but commends her colleague Paul Ryan for the effort. She likes what she has seen so far and is talking to us right now. Congresswoman, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Neil. What's not to love in this Paul Ryan plan? We have a future and a hope for the next generation, as opposed to seeing the United States come closer toward an economic collapse. This is the direction that we need to go, and we need to stand by it and support it.
Does it worry you, Congresswoman, that so few of your Republican colleagues, to say nothing of Democrats, are standing behind them? You are. I commend you for that. But not a whole lot are.
Well, I think the more that they take a look at what President Obama's plan for the future is, compared and contrasted with the Ryan budget, I think it'd be very clear to see that we want a positive option for growth in the private sector, and that's where the Ryan plan leads us.
You know what happens, though, Congresswoman, is they start picking apart the details of it, including the Medicare provisions, which, without going into all the details, talk about changing Medicare as we know it for those 55 and under. To a program where the government would essentially encourage you underwrite efforts to find health insurance elsewhere. That is going to be, I would imagine, a big campaign issue, and it will be like throwing Granny off the cliff times 10. What do you think of that?
Well, I think the Democrats can go ahead and try it, but what they can't answer is the fact that what Paul Ryan's plan does, and does very effectively, is attack the real problem in health care, which is increased costs. When you have competition between private insurance companies, which is where Paul Ryan wants to take us, that brings down the cost of health care. That's what President Obama failed to do in Obamacare. That's what we have to do, is open up the private sector, have more competition, and that'll actually bring down the price of health care for senior citizens. When seniors realize that they'll be getting better quality health care and pay less for it, this will be a very positive, shining example that senior citizens will want.
Then why, again, back to my earlier point, Congresswoman, aren't more Republicans on board? One Republican staffer apparently tweeted this: the GOP budget is a great tool to further divide our caucus and provide fodder for Democrat attack ads. Thank you, Paul Ryan. What do you make of that?
Well, what we need to do is be prepared to stand up for our good ideas. This is a good idea. This cuts spending. It cuts taxes. It grows the private economy. Isn't that what our Republican message is? Now we actually put on paper what we talk about all the time. And I think this is more than a discussion point. This is something that our eventual nominee for the Republican Party needs to put forward as our positive pro-growth vision. And this is a great down payment today.
It is an election year, I've been told, and there is this feeling here that Republicans are positioning themselves as trying to be serious about getting these budget cuts under control, but doing so at the expense of the less fortunate, the elderly. You've heard this before. and that even among your colleagues there is a concern that that will resonate, that in this populist pitch that the president's been raising against the oil companies, against success, against the rich, that you just, or maybe more to the point, Congresswoman, the budget chief, Paul Ryan, have given them another bullet for their gun.
Actually, the big bullet that we should all be talking about is the fact, the government's own statistic that came out less than a month ago in the House Budget Committee, and it was this, Neil. By their own figures, the federal government tells us that effectively our economy in the United States will effectively shut down in 15 years. 15 years. That's according to the government's own statistic. We're the ones who are trying to be the adults in the room and provide a positive path forward. We can't delude ourselves into thinking that we'll be able to continue with our current standard of living if the economy shuts down. So we're putting there a plan to try and keep the economy from shutting down, and that's why we shouldn't be afraid of this. We shouldn't be afraid of the naysayers. We need to be bloody bold and forthright and go forward with this positive plan.
Do you get a sense of that the president is more or less taking the approach? I'm for sweeping cuts over 10 years. Obviously, Paul Ryan's for sweeping cuts over 10 years. But when push comes to shove, as you know, Congressman, we're still going to have, at the very least, under Congressman Ryan's plan, and the most aggressive of them all, still a few $1 trillion more in total debt than we have today. And that's with all of this aggressive saving.
Well, when I was running for President of the United States under the Republican Party, I was advocating far more spending cuts and lower tax rates than even are in the Ryan plan. We recognize that there have to be compromises in order to move forward. I'm grateful for this particular budget. I think this is something we can be proud of. But my personal opinion is that I would have gone farther, because I agree with you. We should not go in the direction of taking on more debt. And I will say, when I came to Congress in January of '07, Neil, it took us 219 years to accumulate $8.67 trillion in debt. This year, we will effectively double that amount in 6 years' time. We can't go down this road and suffer any delusion that we will remain the superpower of the world. We won't. I want the United States to be the #1 economic and military power, and in order to do that, we need to start acting like a superpower and stop spending more money than what we take in.
You know, the president is signing on to this plan, this public works plan that will include, you know, bridges and all of that sort of thing, but has a special treatment of what you want to do. Can you update us on that and whether you feel you are being targeted as a result?
Well, there's no question that I was being targeted, but what's unfortunate is that in my day, the longest unfinished bridge project in the history of the United States of America, but we successfully brought together both Democrats and Republicans, and we passed this bill. And the problem? One federal bureaucrat said that it would be, quote, visual pollution to build a bridge in a site where there already is a bridge. That's nonsense. The Sierra Club grabbed that word, visual pollution, and they kept this bridge tied up in knots in federal court for over 20 years. They took an $80 million bridge, and because of delayed and additional costs, now we're looking at adding hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what has to end in the United States Congress, and I was thrilled to lead this effort to bring Republicans and Democrats together and finally solve this. We've passed 101 bills so far in this session, Neil. Many of them are things that aren't high priority, like renaming post offices. This was a real effort, and we accomplished something, and now we'll finally get a major project done because we put aside partisan differences and we did what the people deserve.
Congresswoman, thank you very much. Good seeing you again.
Good to see you, Neil.